Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to your Monday edition of Pelicans Daily, brought to you by Fan Arch. I'm your host, David Grubb, editor-in-chief of thebirdrights.com. The Orleans Pelicans lost to the Milwaukee Bucks 111 to 107 on Sunday night, a late game and a makeup game due to I think the winter storm. I think that was what delayed it, if I'm not mistaken. Forced this game to be kind of rescheduled, and the Bucks, who were coming on the second night of a back-to-back, went without Giannis Antetokounmpo, who played 43 minutes the night before on Saturday when the Bucks beat Miami. So no Giannis versus Zion, and we'll talk a little bit about those two after this. But that matchup would have been interesting, and I think as you look at this is the first of two matchups between these two teams this week. The Pelicans will play in Milwaukee on Thursday. It would have been really intriguing to see those two guys square off. Instead, you have a Pelicans team decimated by injuries. Besides the normal folks being out of Zion, Trey Murphy, C.J. McCollum, DeJounte Murray, and Herb Jones. You also had another absence for Jordan Hawkins. Back injury feels concerning to me, especially after we're dealing with 2 years of this with an injured back, and he came into the NBA with a back problem. So you never want to see that kind of injury for an athlete. It's hard to get your back better. Your back, your knees, and your feet are probably the three worst things to have injuries as far as basketball goes. Um, and then you were also without Kelly Olynyk, who rested, sat this one out, and then Jose Alvarado, who had a hip injury, also missed this ball game. So a lot of points, rebounds, assists missing for the New Orleans Pelicans. A lot of counting numbers, and then for the Bucks, besides Giannis being out, you also have Bobby Portis, who's suspended, and you also have Damian Lillard, who's still injured as well, among others. So not a lot of star power. Gary Trent went off for the Bucks. He had 29 points. Brook Lopez had a good game at times, shot the ball well early on, and then made some big plays in the post late. But for the Pelicans, again, this last stretch of games, and now there are only uh, 4 games left as we get to the final week of the regular season, if you can believe that. This whole thing has been about, for me, and I've said this for a couple of weeks now, is that you just want to see how the young players are doing, how the rookies doing in particular. And tonight, I think you got another good effort out of the rookies overall. Bruce Brown, among the vets, a solid game for Bruce, 7 to 16 from the floor for 16 points, 9 assists as well, 4 rebounds for him. Um, but you look at this group. Antonio Reeves in 37 minutes, 23 points for Antonio Reeves, 5 for 9 from 3-point range. I think at this stage, I don't see how anyone who has watched this season can think that there's a competition for that third shooting guard spot, because it's not the starter and it's not the first off the bench. Because if CJ is not the starter, then Herb is the starter at that spot. If Herb isn't the starter, then CJ is the sixth man at that spot. So this is the third guard at that shooting guard position. um, I think Antonio Reeves has made the case that he should have those minutes. You don't need a fourth guy. You don't need two guys who're supposed to have a similar skill set. And the one thing you're asking for at that position is somebody who can knock down shots consistently. There aren't any plays called for them, but when you get the ball, and usually it's going to be either, if you're with the second unit, you may have more control of the basketball. But if you're with the starters, if you're subbing in and you're with starters, you're playing with the Zion, you're playing with the Trey Murphy, and you're that third guard out there, then a lot of times what you're catching are grenades. Shots at the end of a shot clock where you're expected, hey, you've caught it, you better be ready to shoot that basketball. So you need somebody who can make shots. And the one thing that we've seen, and I asked Willie Green about this particular in the post game, was that Antonio Reeves, whether he's getting a lot of minutes or just a few minutes, he's been able to consistently make shots. In more than half of his appearances this season, he shot better than 50% from the floor. He didn't do that on Sunday. He was 8 of 18, but still 2 of 2 from the free throw line, 5 of 9 from 3-point range. Okay. He's still got some work to do as far as handling the basketball, but he handled it a lot more than he's used to. This is a guy who is a scorer. That's his job. He is not a point guard. He's not a distributor. He is a shooter. His job is to fill up the bucket, and he did that. Again, 23 points to lead the Pelicans in 37 minutes. And I think it's still, again, this is a young man who's not had that role all season. So now you're asking him to shift his mindset. And the one thing you heard about him from his teammates, and Willie Green emphasized this in the post game, was that Antonio is one of those guys who comes in even after games and continues to shoot. Gets up, I think Antonio Daniels said this during the broadcast, gets up, 1,000 shots a day. I don't know if that's the number, but it's a lot of shots every day. And that's what you want to see. You know that this is the skill you're being asked to bring to the table. There are going to be other guys next year, no matter what, for Antonio Reeves. There are guys who are going to fill in those other roles you expect. If he's starting, that means it's a break in case of emergency. You're breaking glass in case of emergency. If he's starting, so on a consistent basis, on a night-to-night basis, he's either getting very few minutes and being asked to shoot in those minutes. You got to get those shots up. Or if he's playing extended minutes, he's got to be able to, again, show that he can shoot efficiently over the long haul of a game and not just get hot for 1 second and then disappear. Over playing starters minutes, starting the game and then playing starters minutes, 37 total minutes, Antonio Reeves looked like he belonged. There are clearly things that he needs to work on. He had 4 turnovers tonight, but he also had 2 steals as well. So, his rebounding has to improve. But I'm not asking my third guard for a lot of things. What I'm asking for is, can you knock shots and not make me worse? They were +3 with him on the court in 37 minutes. I think that's a good sign. And again, if you take the full body of work from his rookie season, Antonio Reeves has made shots whenever he's been given the opportunity. You can't say the same for Jordan Hawkins right now. And I know it's like pitting the 2 players against each other. But if you're evaluating talent and this team has to get better from one season to the next, you look at Jordan Hawkins, you look at Antonio Reeves, and I think that you have to say, if I'm going to take the risk, I'm using Jordan Hawkins as trade bait or an additional piece this offseason as I try to get better, because you've got to get better. And having both Jordan Hawkins and Antonio Reeves on your roster doesn't make the Pelicans better. It doesn't make them better. You can only afford to have one of those guys. And I think the one guy who's cheaper, better, taller, stronger is Antonio Reeves. He's more NBA ready than any other of those, than Jordan Hawkins at this stage of the game. And it's no need in going out this offseason and trying to find another third guard to do this when you have bigger problems that you've got to deal with, namely going into next season and then missing multiple starters again. So if we're dealing with that position, hey, let's do that. Um, Elfrid Payton, another 10 assist game for Elfrid, but no points in 28 minutes. 0 for 3 shooting, 0 for 1 from 3-point range, 0 for 0 from the free throw line. This is why Elfrid Payton, this is the reason why he has trouble sticking in the NBA. And why, if you're whatever your expectations are of him, whether you like him as a player or don't, there's a ceiling, a hard ceiling for Elfrid Payton, based on the fact that he is not only an unwilling scorer, he doesn't want to shoot, he's not a good shooter. So this is like having Ben Simmons in a lot of ways. It's like having Ben Simmons as your point guard, but smaller. Though Elfrid is not paranoid or frightened of shooting, I said it's like that. He does not want to shoot. For your point guard in a game that you lost by 4 to take only 3 shots all night and give you 0 points, that means he's not putting enough pressure on the rim for you. He's not taking advantage of the opportunities that are there, because your starting point guard has to give you something offensively other than shot creation. Because I'm fine with you setting people up if you're never scoring. So you're not impacting the game that much, especially when, again, you look at the starting lineup. Only one player had a negative plus minus tonight, and that player was Elfrid Payton. Pelicans fans may not remember this, but some of you may. The season that Elfrid was the starting point guard for the Pelicans, the Anthony Davis trade year with him and Julius Randle, during that stretch when Elfrid was putting together consecutive triple doubles, I want to say it was 5 or 6, but during that stretch, he was a net negative in every one of those games by all metrics, plus minus, advanced data, whatever it was, he was a negative when he was on the court, and that's because he struggles to make free throws. He's not for his career. He's not a good free throw shooter. He struggles to take and make shots from distance in a league that is increasingly 3 point dependent, and he won't take. He's not a finisher at the rim. He doesn't take a lot of shots at the basket. So he's not. You've got to get double figures from your starters, and he gave you zero in a game where the Bucks were without a number of starters themselves. That's the hard ceiling on Alfred Payton. Do I think he still has value? Yes, but the illustration here is why. When people wonder why certain players don't stick in the NBA, the Alfred Payton's game tonight is the definition of why he cannot stick to a single team in the NBA, because what he gives you on a night to night basis, what he gives you, the good thing that he does, the elite skill that he has as a passer, and it is an elite skill. He has great court vision. He has great touch. His the pacing of his passes, all those things. He puts him in great location for shooting and all those things. He can't shoot, and he won't shoot, and that's a problem. All four other starters gave you double figures. Your starting point guard gives you not 1 point. Not 1 point, and that's just not enough. Eve Misi, another double double for him: 18 points, 12 rebounds, one block, one steal, three assists as well for Eves. Only one turnover, so that's a good night for him. 0 for 2 at the free throw line. 30 minutes against a quality center in Brook Lopez. A veteran NBA champion, all star, still the all time leading scorer in Brooklyn Nets history. Yes, Brook Lopez is the all time leading scorer in Nets history. You can go look it up. But Yves Missi, a respectable game. And another game, uh, I think now he's set a career best now for a streak with consecutive double figure rebounding games. Willie Green talked about him after the game, saying essentially that they expect double figure rebounds out of Eves every night. His instincts as the on the offensive glass, another three offensive rebounds, the most offensive rebounds by a rookie since Blake Griffin. Eves just continues to show that instinctually he's a good basketball player. Rebounding is a skill, and I think that people have to understand that either you are a rebounder or you're not. Eves Misi is a rebounder. Is he a long term starting center? That question remains to be seen. But I think anybody who doesn't think that the Pelicans won that draft pick, taking him, um, I'm sorry to tell you, yeah, but Yves Misi has provided absolute value for his draft status. He's given you incredible value. He's going to make the all rookie team, which, I know that bar, how high is that bar, but he's going to make an all rookie team. We'll see if he makes the first team. But leading all rookies still in double doubles, another 18 and 12 performance tonight for him, again against a legitimate NBA center in Brook Lopez. That's a good night for him. That's a good night for him. That's something to build on. Another good night for Keon Brooks as well. 13 points, 10 rebounds for him, a double double, the first of his young career. Um, you, I addressed Willie Green about Keon Brooks as well in the pregame, and the comparison was there to Najee Marshall. Again, these are the kinds of players that you have to find in second rounds and in free agency. Guys who are going to do the dirty work, because you're not going to get a lot of opportunities to be the star when you are brought in at the back levels of the bench. If you're not in the top 8, you are there to do specific things. You are either very prolific at one skill, and that skill is usually like shooting or defense, or you provide a little bit of everything on a nightly basis. And that's what Najee Marshall did for the Pelicans. And I think one of the things that we'll have to discuss when we get to the offseason, in retrospect, is how valuable those guys were that David Griffin allowed to leave in the offseason. Because what you lost, the majority of the guys that you lost were the defensive players for this team. You gave away Larry Nance. You gave away Dyson Daniels. You gave away Najee Marshall. And you watch Jonas Valanciunas, who people will talk about his defense, but when you look at the numbers defensively, it wasn't a problem when Jonas was on the floor. There were situations that he could not defend, that he wasn't as good as defending. Absolutely. There were. There absolutely were. But ultimately, Jonas defensively was not a problem for the Pelicans as on the whole. So the Pelicans gave away, and also when you talk about Jonas, before we move on, his defensive impact as a rebounder, being able to seal off possessions because finished them with a rebound. He's such a good rebounder. That's defensive skill as well. So when you look at that impact, you needed a new Najee Marshall, and no one had really stepped into that role during the season. Well, now you're seeing that maybe Keon Brooks can be that guy to fill that role. And as we talk about these guys in this rookie development, it's so important to see these guys because going to have again very little money this offseason to get better. So if you can find cheap in house talent, for this team, if you can find that, that's a win. Pelicans. That is a huge win for the Pelicans. And it looks like they are starting to do that with some of these rookies. So kudos to them. And then finally, the rookie that we've been talking about, of course, is Carlo Makovich. Carlo again gave you some really nice moments offensively, and that's what Carlo is always good about. 11 points for Carlo, but did not shoot it as well as we've seen him in some recent nights. Only 19 minutes, and I think that again, it's because of his defense. It is hard to keep him on the floor as a defender because he gives up points. Pelicans were minus 11, the worst of any player on the team tonight when he was on the floor. He and Jamal Cain. Jamal Cain was a minus 10. It was those two guys who really struggled, and Jamal Cain, 1 of 8, 0 for 6 from three. Not a good game for him, though he did have one really nice block that led to a fast break and a three-pointer by Antonio Reeves. But that was his real highlight of the night. Beyond that, some good rebounding numbers from the bigs overall. Jamal Cain 6 boards, Jeremiah Robinson Earl 6 boards, Carlo Makovich 6 boards. Pelicans had 48 rebounds, still out rebounded by the Bucks 51-48, but the margin wasn't as bad as we've seen it on some nights from the Pelicans. Um, Jamal Cain is just he's not ready, but he's been forced into this role. He'll go back to Birmingham and continue to develop next season. You may see him at Summer League, of course, but he's got a lot of work to do. Just hasn't shown anything this year really, other than athleticism. No real skills to get excited about for him. Jeremiah Robinson Earl, you know what he is. Um, you know, again, I'm not worried about him. I'm not complaining about Jeremiah Robinson Earl. He's the 11th guy on this team. But a nice night for Lester Quinones, brought over from the Golden State Warriors. 17 points for him in 25 minutes, 4 of 5 from 3-point range. The 17 points, a career high for him. Willie Green said he told him, hey, shoot the basketball. And he did that. 5 3-point attempts in 25 minutes for him, 3 assists as well, but though two turnovers on the negative side. But for him, um, yeah, the Pelicans brought him in to shoot. They asked him to shoot the ball tonight. He shot the ball. He shot it pretty well. Pelicans got up 33 3-pointers overall tonight against the Bucks, 12 for 33 from 3-point range, but didn't get to the free throw line. And that's once Zion Williamson and CJ McCollum, those kind of guys are gone, it's going to be really hard for the Pelicans to get to the free throw line consistently. They're just not going to get the calls, and they don't have the kind of players who are going to drive and get to the bucket consistently. Shot it fairly well, 45% from the floor overall. Again, um, not going to complain too much about this ball game. Moving on, one of the interesting conversations I had before the game was with Doc Rivers, and this is very briefly, but we were talking about comparing Zion Williamson and Giannis because there are some similarities to them. It's like you kind of have a pocket Giannis when you're talking about Zion. Zion clearly not as tall as Giannis, but the kind of impact. And Giannis has gone back to playing some point guard recently before sitting out tonight's game, but they're back to playing him at the point guard spot, which is something they did very early in his career. Point Giannis was a thing, though he was 6'10", and people thought, this doesn't make sense to have him playing point guard. But Jason Kidd at the time felt like because of his ability to get to the basket, where have you heard this before? His uncanny ability to get to the basket and finish, he wanted the ball in his hands and wanted him going downhill. And it's almost like, if you read comic books, or if you've seen the movies, if you're watching the X-Men movies, there's a character called Juggernaut. And the thing about Juggernaut is that when he's going full steam, there's really nothing that can stop him. That's kind of the way Giannis and Zion play. If you allow them to go downhill, if they can get up that speed, there's nothing you can do to stop them. And so how do you look at those two players and compare them? Because I think the comparison is apt. I've talked about Zion and Allen Iverson, and I think that's a fair comparison as well. They're very unique players at certain points. And I think all of your great players, when you look at history, all the great players are unique, and you have to adapt to building around them. And so when you look at Zion, let's just compare Zion and Giannis's first 5 years in the league. And at that point, Giannis had played almost twice as many games as Zion has at this stage. 5 seasons in, but Zion has the advantages in a number of areas. Zion outpaces Giannis in scoring average, assists, field goal percentage, effective field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, and box plus minus. For Giannis has the advantages in rebounding, steals, blocks, free throw percentage, and value over replacement player. At that time, Giannis too had really his career ascendancy was so fast, his progression so quickly. He went from 6 points a game as a rookie, and by year 5, he was already a two-time All NBA player. He was already a two-time All Defensive player. He was finishing top 10 in MVP voting. And no, all we've gotten out of Zion and Giannis that as far as awards go, that's comparable is that they both had been two-time All Stars up to this point. So clearly, Giannis, it's not fair to compare the career accolades at this stage. But when you talk about the unique qualities of their game and how they play and what you want to build around them, I think that there are a lot of similarities. And I think that when you talk about the path and putting this team together, then that's where things get interesting because there is an art and a science to building a roster. And what the Bucks decided to do with Giannis very early on, the first player that there was only one player up until this year, and that trade was made. There was only one player on the Bucks roster who had been with Giannis for every season of his career going into this year, and that player was Chris Middleton. Chris Middleton and Giannis came in together as rookies, and if you remember, Middleton was traded from Detroit. Middleton and Giannis come together as rookies and were together every year up until this season. That's the only player. The Bucks went through multiple teams and multiple coaches with Giannis, obviously, to get to the point where they have a championship. And they went through very different supporting casts. They thought at one point it was going to be Brandon Jennings and Giannis and Jabari Parker, and injuries sidelined and disrupted that team. Cost Jabari Parker his NBA career in a lot of ways. He ended up having to move on. Injuries, sidelined him. He was a kind of a version of Carmelo Anthony, a poor man's Carmelo, but a very talented player, just not Carmelo Anthony, who's going to the Hall of Fame. But you see what I'm talking about, where the Bucks had a team that they thought they were going to build around, and that changed. They started with Jason Kidd as coach, and then you went to these other coaches that Giannis had during his career, and you had to keep making these changes. But eventually, you found the players. Even up until that team that had made Eastern Conference Finals, and as Pelicans fans know, the Pelicans gave them their final piece in that trade. Taking in Eric Bledsoe and George Hill and sending the Bucks Drew Holiday, that gave them the final piece they needed for a championship. But that was a lot of tweaking to get to that stage. It is both art and science. And so, you can. There are so many ways to criticize how the Pelicans got to this stage, how they got to this place where 6 years after having the number one pick in the draft, you are right where you started in a lot of ways. Things have just gotten very, very bad. Um, eh, but what do you do to make it better? How do you fix this problem? How do you reconstruct the roster? And I think that ultimately it starts with the principles that you want to have, and you have to decide to build around a singular player. And I've said this before, and I will say it again, and you've heard me say that, and I'll say that again. Uh, the original sin for the Pelicans was not knowing and deciding who you were building around. You tried to build two teams, one for Zion and one for when Zion was not around. You couldn't hedge your bets. At some point, you have to go all in. You have to go all in. Your player has to deliver. That's true. That absolutely has to happen. Your player has to deliver. But you also have to have an organizational understanding of what it is that you want and who it is that you are placing around your best player. And now that you have decided to build around Zion Williamson, the Pelicans have to reconfigure this roster once again. And there are absolute players that they can go out and look at. And once the regular season is over, we will really start to get in targets and into the discussions about targets and trade rumors and all those things. And I think that there are absolute players out there who maybe not MVP candidates and all stars that at the level that you may be thinking of, but there are very good players in the NBA who could help this team turn around. And I think it's a 2-year process. When you look at how teams do before they win a championship, um, the 2 years prior, especially when you look at the last 15 years or so, what you'll find is that 2 years prior to winning a championship, very few teams had bad seasons. So if you take this to be the bad season, next season has to be a fairly good season. You got to get into the 35 to 45 win range next season if you want to win a championship within the next 3 years. Health is the biggest factor, certainly. All championship teams, no matter what, get a lot of luck when it comes to health. The Celtics were very healthy last season when they won the championship. The year before that, the Nuggets were very healthy before, winning the championship. Health has such a big part of winning a championship. So, but you can't control that. I cannot program that into the equation. It is a variable. It is X. So, what can I control is the level of talent that I have on my roster. This season, the Pelicans came in with a talent deficient roster. Even if everybody had been healthy, I would contend that the talent was deficient because you had a giant hole at center and you still had not solved your backup point guard problem. And those things played themselves out as the injury. They were exacerbated by the injuries, but those problems were glaring enough that I think they would have sidelined any real opportunity for success this season. You would have won more games had this team been healthy. Absolutely. That is not the argument I'm making at all. But what I am arguing is that the season at some point would have been sidelined by those giant roster flaws because we've seen every year the Pelicans have carried a giant roster flaw into the regular season. A giant roster flaw. Not something you say, hey, we can tweak this and make it work. Whenever we walked into this season, the criticism has been there that there's been at least two holes on this roster. And the two biggest holes have been at center, whether we're missing a backup. This year was missing a starter, but last year was missing a backup behind Jonas Valanciunas. And it's also been either a starting point guard or a backup point guard. Last season there was no starter. This season you had a starter, but you had no backup. And your starter is still not really a point guard. He is a lead guard. So the Pelicans still need to find that combination of distributor while DeJounte Murray is healing from his Achilles surgery. The Pelicans have to find a way to construct the roster best suited for Zion Williamson's talent this offseason. The two players that we know based on the data that work very well with Zion, and the third is CJ McCollum, but the two players that you know work well, and this is why the Pelicans, because they have this data and they have better data than what we have, is that Herb Jones and Trey Murphy work well, very well with Zion Williamson. Again, Herb Jones has been your best or second best player with regards to on offs every year he's been with the team. His numbers with Zion Williamson are Zion's best. Same with him and Trey Murphy. When you put those three on the floor, the three-man lineups that work best with Zion, Herb, Trey, Zion. The four-man lineups that have worked best with Zion since he joined the team, CJ, Trey, Herb, Zion. So I know that those four work together. That kind of tells you what that problem was before, doesn't it? You didn't have the right center or you didn't have the right wingman, Brandon Ingram. So you've tried to fix those problems. Now you know that you've got some of those components in place, right? You've got to fill out the rest. You may not have Herb and Trey to start the season based on their recovery from their shoulder surgeries. So how do you flesh out the rest of the roster and the guys that you do have, and you look at them and you say who fits and who doesn't? It looks like Antonio Reeves is a fit. Yves Misi, um, unless you're potentially using him, and we'll talk about this in the offseason as well. How do you use Yves Misi if you're trying to get an upgrade at the center position? Because you may have to do that. But Yves Misi as a player, he seems to work okay here as far as what his limited role could be, as he develops and gets better over the next couple of seasons. Everybody else, whether it's a Keon Brooks, whether it's a Carlo Makovich, Bruce Brown, everybody else, they're not good enough to get you over that hump, I don't think. Not even a Kelly Olynyk. I think if you had a better version of Kelly Olynyk, then you could start talking about a championship. But if you can't find a better version of Kelly Olynyk, he is a passable NBA player. And he's not super expensive, but he's not a center. He's more like a stretch four. He's not really a center. He doesn't rebound like a center, doesn't block shots like a center. He's more like a stretch four. So the Pelicans are going to have to really work on that roster construction as we get into next season. Uh, and lastly, we'll go into the final week of the regular season. It is a busy week, 4 games in this final week. Starting on Tuesday, the Pelicans will be on the road for that one. It will be uh, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting who that is. Who is the first game on the road? I think it's Brooklyn. I want to say Brooklyn. Yes, it is Brooklyn. So they'll go to Brooklyn on Tuesday. They'll be in Milwaukee on Thursday. Back home in New Orleans against Miami on Friday, and then closing the season against the Oklahoma City Thunder on Sunday. I don't think that game will mean anything to the Thunder, but it won't mean anything to the Pelicans either. So we'll see how many folks show up for the season finale. It'll just to be a really disappointing season finale for the end of a really disappointing season. But the final week of the season, that doesn't mean that we will not be here every day of the week. We will. We'll be here every day. It's called Pelicans Daily. So what do you expect? We'll be here every day this week breaking down things and talking about the rumors and everything else going on with the Pelicans. Um, and I'll be there for Friday and Saturdays back to back. I mean, Friday and Sunday's final games. So make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you comment below. Let me know what you think about the topics. Let me know what you think about what I'm saying. And if you got any questions for yourself that you want me to answer on the show, I will do that for you. So, just drop your name, drop your question. I'll shout you out. I'll get you on it and talk about your topic. So go ahead and do that. You can also follow me on social media at DM Grubb. And make sure you check out thebirdrights.com every day for Pelicans news and notes and stories as well. So the next time, y'all be good and have a great day.